Hey, welcome to the CMO Whisper Show. I'm your host, Steve Olensky. Part marketing practitioner, part ad agency veteran, part journalist. I was a writer for Forbes for 10 years. I've had so many insightful conversations over the years with business leaders, to athletes, to celebrities, to, of course, CMOs. The only difference now is instead of sharing those insights through written form, I'm doing it this way.
My guest this week is Edithann Ramey, the Chief Marketing Officer at Six Flags Entertainment, where she oversees marketing strategy, consumer experience, CRM, group sales, and revenue management for North America's largest regional theme and water park company. Now, before joining Six Flags, Edithann was CMO at On the Border, a Mexican casual dining chain, where she developed the brand's global marketing strategy, elevating its presence through innovative menu promotions and guest-focused experiences. She has also served as Senior Director of Brand Extensions at Topgolf, where she launched and marketed new brand properties, including Top Tracer and Swing Sweets, achieving double-digit growth for the company. Earlier in her career, Edithann held various roles at Chili's, including VP of Marketing, where she oversaw advertising, promotions, media planning, and PR across the U.S. She has also worked with Brinker International's Maggiano's Little Italy and held marketing positions at Nokia, Yum Brands, and Cadbury Schweppes, contributing to brand and product innovation efforts. And finally, Edithann holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan and an MS in corporate comms from Boston University. Originally from Puerto Rico and raised in Mexico City, she now lives in Coppell, Texas with her husband, Jason, their teenage twins, and two dogs, Nacho and Lulu. Edithann, welcome to the CMO Whisper Show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I am so excited too. We just met, I don't know, like less than a week ago at the time of this recording, and it feels like I've known you.
Thank you so much. I feel the same way. I'm excited to talk to the Whisperer. I want to see what you get me to whisper today.
So noted. So I want to jump in with the world of marketing, of course. And I say, of course, because that's, given what you and I both share, that history of marketing. But I know as we talked off air, there's some things you want to share, some advice you want to share for marketers. And what I'd like to come at this is kind of a multi-pronged, meaning I'd love to get your advice for marketers who were just starting out, for example, and then give, advice for the CMOs who are listening. So I want to break down the word marketers into different kind of segments, to use our term, if you will. So let me start with new marketers, freshly graduated, or people who are in school or thinking about taking marketing. What advice do you give to newbies?
Yeah, and I talk to them all the time. They're very receptive to feedback and direction, and I love talking to college kids who want to be me someday. And a couple of interesting things. One is I tell them not to drown in internships. I think it's become so aggressive in how many internships these students think they need to do. And what you really need is just one or two really good experiences under your belt that help you understand what it is you want to do. There's different, facets to marketing, whether it's the communications route, which you mentioned I studied, in the PR piece. And then there's the everyday marketing, there's casual, there's CPG, there's just so many. So if you can just expose yourself a little bit, but if you do way too many, it becomes unnecessary, and it's a law of diminishing returns, as I tell them. I also tell them to really think about the industry they want to be in. I think that affects how you feel about the work, because I feel very strongly that you should have fun at work. And so really trying to figure out where you want to be and what kind of industry you want to represent. I think you can say it and believe it, that you could represent anything as a marketer. But I do believe that if you have passion for the brand that you're working for and it means something, you'll love the job better. And then I tell them to take some time and work a little bit before they go pursue the graduate degree. I think they need to get out in the world and kind of experience it before they continue in academia. And then finally, I tell them, leverage every person and lead you know. The first job I ever got was because my dad played golf with some guy who worked at some PR agency. And he mentioned that he had a daughter who'd studied that, and would he have any open jobs? Lo and behold, he gets me through the door. I interview and get a job. So you don't know where your job's going to come from. So ask your mother, your father, your cousin, anybody to help you network, because that's the way to get the job.
I could not agree more. I know people are listening, they cannot see this, but I was like a bobblehead agreeing with you.
Yeah.
I am the living embodiment of the power of relationships. And I can tell you are too. And it's really, it's an adage, it's a cliche, but it's really who you know and who you meet and who you maintain relationships with.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. So let me move it now to the other end of the spectrum in terms of marketers, those who are VPs, let's say, or new CMOs, or even a seasoned CMO. What are some things that through that lens you would say to these folks?
I think one of the most powerful things that I've learned that I would advise my colleagues and people in the industry on is that there's a lot to do. It's just become so busy and there's so much activity going on and they ask you to do so much and look at so much and drown in the data. And I think you really always have to go back and look at your desired result. What is the actual true KPI? And then build the tactics behind that. And if anything falls outside of that, scratch it off. And just because you did all these activities you said you were going to do, you might not get that result. So make sure that you're constantly adjusting your plan to make sure that where you need to go and what you need to deliver on is what you're working behind. I can't tell you how many times people on my team, colleagues in the marketing world will say, I got so much done and I'm so proud of that. And I'm like, well, how are the results for the company? And they're like, oh, well, we didn't have a really good year. I'm like, then what you worked on really didn't get you there. I'm so glad that you got all these things done and your checklist was taken care of. But it's so silly that it's so simple. But my advice would be to really focus on the end goal and build your plan from there. And like you heard me say, I often tell a lot of people, don't drown in that data. It seems like lately it's become all about, we're going to test this and we're going to do that piece of research. And there's a lot of information just by sitting in a restaurant and looking at people eat or going to an amusement park and watching people make a line for a roller coaster. So how do you educate yourself on what the problems of the brand are without going too crazy on the research and really leveraging so much more that human experience or the interaction with your brand? So just a couple thoughts there.
I love. And it's a great segue into the little 2-letter acronym that is on everybody's mind these days, and it's AI. And as I'm listening to you going, nah, last time I looked, AI cannot go to a restaurant. AI cannot go to an amusement park. I'm obviously being facetious, but I love that you have that mentality, if you will, of, yeah, I mean, I'm sure you use AI and your team uses AI, and I want to hear all about that as how you use AI and what your thoughts on AI, but nothing will ever replace that in-person human experience.
Agree. Do you want to hear a little bit about AI?
I do.
It's interesting. Like it's seeping into different places, but to your point, it does not feel like it's anywhere at the center or heart of everything that we do or the tools that we need. It like participates and helps. Like we have an AI program that we can tap into that helps us improve our advertising. So it'll go out into the marketplace. It'll evaluate how the advertising is doing, give you feedback on how you should improve it, and improves it for you. So it's like help, but I'm not relying on this thing to tell me what I should go advertise or what to talk about. We leverage AI a lot for writing. And I know that that's not a good piece of advice for a lot of the marketers in college. You need to write your own stuff. But once you're at a point where there's so much to write and so much communication to put out there, we leverage AI a lot in honing in communications, especially on the public relations side. So it's just become a true assistant as it's supposed to be. And I don't think it's ever going to get to a place where it leads any kind of program or initiative or anything we do, but we're grateful for it.
Yeah. But look, the word I always use for when it comes to AI is tool. Mm-hmm. It's a tool, and it's like any other tool in your toolbox. Is it more impactful? Probably, and will be, but it's not a be all end all that you just drop it in and set it and forget it either.
Yeah. Agree.
Yeah. Interesting. So leadership, that comes up a lot. On all my interviews, it comes up a lot when I speak to leaders, and I always am fascinated by their particular style and how there's two sides of this coin of how do you define your leadership style, and then how would you say others define your leadership style? And sometimes they're not always the same.
Yeah.
So
that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you define your own leadership style?
I mean, I would tell you that it's been honed and developed throughout my whole career. I mean, this probably has happened to you, but like you become a boss overnight. Like it's the one thing that it's not like you study to become a leader. You don't study to become a boss. I mean, you might take some classes, but all of a sudden you're a senior manager, you deliver great results, and they promote you to that next step where you're managing a team of people. You've never done it before. And so at the beginning of that journey, the way that I had attacked it was to say, I'm going to be the boss that I want to be. Why wouldn't anybody else want that boss? I wanted somebody who kind of let me run. I wanted somebody who didn't really drive me too crazy with compliments because I don't need them. I just kind of want to get the work done. I was somebody who just wanted a lot of projects. Like I kept thinking that if I could do that for people, they'd be happy. And what I learned very quickly is that you need to be the boss people need you to be. And so my leadership style is very adaptive. I'm very careful to understand what people need in order to get their jobs done. And some people need more connection and they need me to ask them how their weekend was, or they need me to let them be, or I need to flex and give them more information, or I need to give them less information. I've learned so much, whether it's through Myers-Briggs or just through interacting with people and listening to what they need, to become an adaptive leader. But then the second part of that is I'll give you that, but my expectation is going to be that you're going to deliver that desired result you and I talked about at the beginning of the conversation. Like I've set out the KPI. I know what I need. So I very much believe in a culture of accountability. And I've spent a lot of time honing those skills, how to have conflictive conversations in a way that feels good, how to give feedback in a way that you appreciate it and you act on it. And then how do we converse and figure out what's going on if you can't get the work done? So a leader who believes in accountability, a leader who believes in adaptability, and somebody who truly believes that their team is almost a family of sorts. And I know that for some people out there, they may go, that's a little crazy. I'm like, it's not. I spend my whole day at the office. So these are the people that I spend most of my time with. I want to like them. I want to be able to take a long flight next to them and chat the whole way there. I want to feel like I want to see them the next day. So those are all very important things to me when it comes to being a leader.
Yeah, it always fascinates me that at the end of the day, everything comes down to relationships. And I maybe just the amateur student of human nature in me. It fascinates me that some people, when they hear the word relationship, they automatically think personal and personal only. But everything we do is relationships. And like you said, you spend 8 hours a day with people, give or take.
Yes.
You got to have a good relationship with that person.
Yes. It's so important to connect. I remember we were in a big meeting and we were talking about, should you like the people that you work with? And some guy in the meeting said, no, you don't have to. And then the big boss, the CEO goes, then you must work with somebody you don't like. But at the end of the day, that's what I want for myself. And that's what I want for everybody in this room. And it was so shocking to admit it, but it felt really good. And that's not to say that if you don't get along, then you can't work together. But isn't it nice if you can build, like what you're saying, that connection, that relationship, work together well, trust each other, collaborate well? It makes your day so much better.
It makes your life so much better in a lot of ways, right? Because you said you spend so much of your life with these people. Again, like your point, to add on to what you just said, which I thought was really smart. It's not like you're going to like spend the rest of your life with these people and spend every waking hour. So you're not going to have everything in common. But by the same token, there's got to be that level of respect and that working relationship. It just makes sense to want to work with people that you like and vice versa.
I'll tell you another story, if you'd like, about leadership that really changed my life outlook too. Like I don't like business books. I don't know. They just, they're a little boring sometimes, but you read them, right? And you leverage them to kind of become a better leader. I finally got to a book that I really loved. It was about leadership styles and death by meeting by Andrew Lencioni. And he came to speak at one of our meetings, like at one of our conferences. And he talked about how in life, if you could be a good person and a good leader and be kind and fair to somebody on your team, they go home and are kind and good to their family and to their communities, and that we almost had like a job to do in that, and that it was something we could give back to the world. It was so lofty to me, but it totally makes sense because when I have a bad day and I don't feel like the boss was fair and it didn't go well, I go home cranky and tired and sad. And so to have that much power over somebody's livelihood and happiness, I take very seriously. And I want them to feel like they want to be a part of the team. And if you can deliver on all that and make them feel that special, that they're part of something great, they will deliver great results, which is the best part.
Could not agree more. Absolutely could not agree more. One last thing on leadership, though, before we move on, is that other side of that coin. How you define your leadership style. Do you know, or do you even ask? Like some leaders will ask their staff. How do you think those who report into you would define your leadership style? Would it be the same?
Well, because I mean, so much of being a leader for me is being adaptive. I think they would say that about me. I also would think that they would say I'm collaborative. I've worked on that too. When I first became, a director, I wanted to be directive. I wanted to tell people what to do because that's what I've done as a senior manager to get the results I was getting. But as a director, there were other directors you had to interact with in order to get big agendas done and big projects across the organization done. So I've worked a lot at being collaborative, and that means seeking input, selling in things before final decisions are made, things like that I think my colleagues would say are important aspects of my leadership style.
Interesting. Okay. So you just mentioned a few minutes ago the phrase culture of accountability. Mm-hmm. And I know it's very important to you. And what I'd love to start with is how do you define that? Because in my opinion, I think sometimes the word accountability, and you can disagree with me and it's fine. I think sometimes people have that when they hear accountability, they think, oh, the company or the boss is just trying to hold me to an unreasonable standard or set me up to fail or things like that. That's the perception some people give me throughout my career. And it's interesting. Again, there's that human nature in me going, why do you think that way? Like, why is that word accountability a negative thing? Because we're all held to a level in one shape or form. So let me get your thoughts on that first before we get into how you define culture of accountability. Do you think that word gets a little negative?
I think it's very negative, but it doesn't surprise me to hear that you've heard people say that because accountability sounds like a really scary word. Like, what? Like you're saying I have to do these things and you're going to watch and make sure I get them done. And that's not really how we define it and not how I define it, but I can see why people would think it's negative because it almost connotates a little bit of I'm being watched over and I'm going to be held accountable. The way I define it is really about working on an end goal that we both agree upon. So therefore, you won't feel that way, right? You won't feel like I can't do that and you put something over me that I can't deliver on. We're both going to agree this is what we need to get done. And we're both going to agree on how we're going to get it done. And then you go off. And if you're not doing it the way we discussed, then a culture of accountability is inclusive of feedback and conversations where we go through that and we figure out why it's not happening. And then we do have ways in which to continue to improve upon it. And I support you on it to get you there. But it really is about what I talked to you at the beginning. A successful marketer has to deliver that end result. And you could get very mired in swirl and very mired in tactics and try all kinds of things. And you'll get credit for that because I think you should try and you should swing for the fences. But it really, at the end of the day, they're going to ask you the question like, did you get it done? Did we drive the revenue reset, et cetera? And that's what the culture of accountability is about, keeping you very focused on it and having us all partner together in getting there.
I think so much of that apprehension, if you will, can be eliminated. And that's a strong word, but I mean eliminated by two things. One is that initial understanding of, you saying KPIs. What is the expectation, right, for a given role? Clearly defined, right? Clearly defined before you start whatever that project or campaign, whatever the case may be. That's number one. And then number two, having that communication through the process. Hey, I don't know if I'm going to hit my numbers, or hey, I could use your help, versus don't saying anything until it's too late.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Totally. And do you know what is incredible to me? Because it's happened to me several times. And if there's a marketer out there listening, they should try this when they get back to the office. Ask, like your direct reports, sure. Ask levels below. What are we trying to achieve? Like what is our number one goal? And you'd be shocked at how many organizations they go, well, I mean, we're trying to kind of work on driving sales. And you're like, no, there's an actual number. Like if we don't hit that, then, we don't flow through. We don't have a good stock price. Like you said, what you said is right on. Like you have to be able to agree upon it, articulate it, and then continue to repeat it. We have to continue to remind ourselves, this is what we're trying to get done. So, so important.
And it sounds, and I'm saying this for a reason, it sounds so simplistic, but that's the point.
Yes.
It just blows my mind when I hear stories of, well, I didn't know what my KPI was. Right? Did you ask? Well, no. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, then, and did you have status throughout the quarter? No, not really. Okay. And it goes both ways. It's, the onus is on the leader and the staff for sure.
Yes, for sure.
Right? To speak up. And as a leader, this, you have to give your staff that comfort, I guess is a word, to say, no, literally and figuratively, my door is always open.
For sure. And that's one of my favorite stories that I like to tell that happened to me early on was I wanted to get promoted and I had a one-on-one with the boss. And I had walked in and had put together a document of everything I had done during the year. Look at all these amazing things I had done. And like you and I were just talking about, we go through them. He agrees they were flawlessly executed. He gives me that compliment. You're like, when you do things, you do them great. Mm-hmm. But the brand's at negative growth right now. Like, we've had a really bad year. We're not going to make bonus. Do you think that these things on this list were going to get us there? Or can you appreciate that everything that's on that list got done, but we still didn't get to where we were going, and I need you to take us there? And it was such an overnight shocking moment, because I thought I was worthy of this promotion and I was going to do these great things, and I was told something so different. And since then, I've honed my brain, taught my brain to think differently about kind of where are we going, what are we doing, and are we getting it done?
That's fascinating. And that you've maintained that thought process of always keep your eye, cliche time, always keep your eye on the ball, always keep your eye on the end result, whatever the case may be, and what you're doing at that moment will impact the end result.
Yeah. And as we've gotten leaner and meaner in organizations, because I will tell you now at Six Flags, it's a small and mighty team. That's so critical, because there are times when you want to do really great things. Like, somebody came to me the other day and said, we want to do this amazing concert series. I'm like, okay, I get it that you want to do this great program, and it sounds amazing. It sounds on brand. Wouldn't it be great to do a concert series at an amusement park? But right now, our spend per person through the door is down. Are we working on new food and beverage innovation? Are we working on, like, I kind of challenge them to think about, is that the right program? And then they're like, oh no, but I kind of really want to do it, but I know what you're saying makes sense. And so we change course, and I do it to this day.
Yeah. And I know as a leader, you're going to agree with this too. What I'm about to say is, you never want to discourage any ideas.
Right.
Like
100%.
I tell keep them coming. We're not going to do 90% of them, but so what? The 10% could be game changers that I can't think. I don't think of everything.
Yes, I agree. And we're going to try some things that maybe don't really feel like they could get us there, but they might. And so isn't that exciting? I mean, I think you still have to have room for being fun and innovative and trying new things, but always in a thoughtful manner and with the resources that you have.
I always relay, there's a couple of Steve Jobs quotes that I always fall back on, like you were saying about in your past. And one of them is, it was early on, it was him and Wozniak in the beginning of Apple, and they're sitting in front of their first group of engineers. And he said, I'm going to get one thing abundantly clear. I'm paraphrasing. One thing abundantly clear. We didn't hire you to tell you what to do. We hired you so you'll tell us what to do.
Yeah. Love that.
Right? The egoless, check your ego at the door. And no, the other quote that ties right into this, that Steve Jobs, they think it's his quote, but he's attributed to it. You never want to be the smartest person in any room.
Yeah, I love that.
I hold both of those near and dear, and I try to live up to those with my teams, going, you tell me what to do. I don't know everything.
Yeah. I was reading something about, because I'm always working on trying to make meetings as effective as possible, because I will tell you, I spend a lot of time in meetings. Mm-hmm. And you tell yourself you're going to stop, but you got to meet, right? We got to come together. It has to happen. Yep. And I've done little things like block lunch. So maybe there's like a half an hour there for myself, or block a couple hours to think. But when you're CMO, it's kind of difficult to tell people, I'm going to spend 2 hours in my office with the door closed. You do it when you can, but most of the time people want to interact with you. And I read something about how in a room, if you're the most senior person, you should be the one that talks the least. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was so interesting, because I have been in meetings where the most senior person talks the whole time. And you're kind of sitting there going, okay, what do I say? And when you flip it, when you do that, the ideas come at you, and the conversation really happens, and the work gets really done. So, to your point about how do you, work together that way, and how do you make people really interact, and how are you a good leader? Like, sometimes it's just about listening.
As much as I'm a naturally unassuming person, but I'm also cognizant of, I'm a big guy with a big voice, right? And if I have a title in front of me, just by walking in a room, people are going to be intimidated and afraid, not knowing, like, no, I'm the most easygoing person you're ever going to meet. But if you don't convey that and express that verbally and non-verbally, like you just said, by not dominating conversations, they're going to sit on their hands the whole meeting, and then nothing gets done.
Yes. I 100% agree. I've gotten in the habit of asking people on my team, when they come with an opinion or an idea, well, can you just tell me what you think about it? Whether we're looking at creative, whether we're, just talking about something somebody came to us about, what do you think about it? They often forget to say that. They'll show up and be like, we've been approached to do this. What do you think? There's this new SEO program. Should we do it? I'm like, I want your opinion. So I almost have trained myself to always ask, what do you think? I mean, what a simple question, but if you don't ask, then all of a sudden I'll tell you what to do and we're moving.
What that shows so quickly, though, is you respect their opinion. Mm-hmm. It goes so far.
Yeah.
And it's a sign of a good leader. And I'll say it for you. It's a sign of a good leader. You're welcome.
Thank you.
So you said something to me off air about, Steve, let's talk about some fun stories that shaped who you are. And you kind of teased me, right?
Yeah.
I want to hear, share a couple that you want to share about these quote unquote, because it's fun stories that shaped who you are.
Yeah.
Take it from there.
I think a lot of it are just moments and situations where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened to me. And then you learn so much I had a huge meeting I had to go to, and I showed up to the meeting, sat down, well prepared, ready to go in this big, huge hotel. And it was a huge conference, and I went to the wrong place and sat in the wrong room and missed my presentation. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. But you kind of learn to write it down, make sure you know where you're going. So that was something I learned very quickly. I also think, there's a lot of learnings from just interactions with people in a big conference and learning to talk and interact with others. And this one is not as funny as much as it was a huge learning. I had a colleague come by after and say, hey, you sell us in every single meeting. You're like a salesperson, like every single idea when you're sitting around us, and we're your colleagues. And I hope you think we're as smart as you are, but you won't let it go. You're like a dog with a bone with every idea you say. And I was like, wow, I hadn't even thought about it. So it was such a moment of, because you would like to think you're self-aware, but you're not, and always. And so it was a moment that not only gave me great feedback about how I was expressing myself and what people were thinking of that they felt like I wasn't listening and I was kind of harping on my ideas. But then I realized that feedback was very important. And from that day forward, I've valued it a lot and seek it. It is really hard for people to ask for feedback, certainly even harder to give it. But I've gotten in the habit asking for feedback. So that was, one of those stories where you're like, wow, that really affected me. And I need to keep asking for feedback because I had no idea I was doing it. So that was kind of fun, right? I think that, being a woman in the industry is always interesting. As I've gotten this senior, there are less and less women in the room. And, having that one moment where you sit through a meeting like I did with something on your shirt, and, people are kind of looking at you, but no one's willing to say anything. And then afterwards, the only other woman in the room came by and was like, girl, you have something on your shirt. So when you go back into this meeting, clean it off. And I was like, how grateful am I that she would come out and say that to me? And so another big learning was that you need friends in your workspace. Like, I've actually learned that having allies and people who help you and will tell you there's something on your shirt is fantastic. And actually was able to go back to her for feedback on how the presentation went, and always had somebody that I could bounce ideas off of. So that's another big piece of advice. Like, back to your conversation about relationships and what does that mean? And are we talking personal? I think that it's okay to have a little bit of that personal seep into work and have people that you can connect with, that you can go talk to and be frustrated with. So just a couple of different instances where something really bad happens, but then it becomes kind of good, and you learn a little.
It's real important. One of my favorite phrases in life is you need people in your life who don't necessarily tell you what you want to hear, but what you need to hear.
Yes.
Massive difference.
Massive difference. Yeah, 100% agree. And I'm a communicator. And so I rely on what I say a lot. But you brought this up a little bit ago. I have so many instances where your body language is so critical. And I guess I was in a meeting and somebody said something that made me really mad, and I completely shut down. And afterwards, people are like, we could tell you're so mad. And yet I'd had a message in the meeting and I had talked about things, but they were completely lost because of the way that I behaved. And I'm not a poker player, so I've had to learn how to control kind of my emotions. And there's been a lot of learnings in that too, and funny moments, right? I
am laughing because it's one of my lines. It's so funny you say that. Like, I am self-admittedly the world's worst poker player.
Yeah. And as a leader, you need it. You need to be a little bit more in control.
Exactly. Right. But I can't help who I am, like who you are at the end of the day. But I guess it's contextual, right? In those content of the meetings you're in. And you have to be I have to remind myself if I'm on a Zoom call, like, okay, keep this kind of persona, if you will. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but you have to maintain that.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, continue to have that vulnerability and that empathy as a woman. It's a lot harder because we talked so much just now about controlling your emotions and not having kind of that poker face. But at times you do have to allow for it to come out, and it's become something cool for people to be like, wow, we've got this boss. She leads this big team. And there are times when she's truly vulnerable. Like I remember when I first started working in the industry, my female boss didn't even have a picture of her kids at work. Like we didn't even know she was a mom. And that too has become important to me, that my bio talks about my kids and my dogs, is because they're part of who I am. And if we're going to be together in the office all day, I'm going to share a little bit of that with you, or I'm going to share when I'm frustrated, or you might see me a little sad that we're not where we need to be. Like that's also been important along the way.
1,000%, without question. Okay. This is the new part of my show where I call it the Random Five, where I just have this big, huge database of different questions to ask my guests as I end each episode. Okay.
Okay.
So
okay.
if you're game, they're all fun. Okay. It's just to kind of get to know you better. Okay.
Okay.
First question: who's the most influential person in your life, and how did they impact you?
I think the most influential person is my mother. She was a stay-at-home mom, so her love and affection and passion for her family is something that was important to me. And she is an eternal optimist. Life will kick you in the face. You might be down, but you get yourself back up and you keep going. And it's been something that I've relied on in my career and in my life. And so that attitude towards life has been very inspiring to me and continues to be.
If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who is it and why?
Do they have to be dead or alive?
No, either living or dead.
Okay. I want to have dinner with Steven Spielberg. I just think he's incredibly brilliant. He's creative. He makes the most beautiful stories. So he is a communicator, right? So I can learn a little bit about that. But I also think that he's just told such beautiful stories. And I want to get all the behind the scenes information about how he made all these great movies, including Jaws, which is probably my least favorite of his because it's super scary. I never got in the water after that, but you know.
Okay. What's a hobby or passion of yours that most people wouldn't expect?
I'm a needle pointer. I like to needle point. And I like to do crossword puzzles. I think maybe you could be like, okay, I get the crossword. But when I tell people that I needlepoint, they go, what? But it's the most calming thing. And there's a pattern. So I don't have to think. I just take, the whole thing and do it without thinking. And it gives me peace.
Cathartic.
Yes.
I love it. Okay. If you weren't in this current role, right? If I give the magic wand, what's your ultimate dream job? Anything.
I would be a news anchor. Like I would be somebody who interviews people. I love interviewing people. I love spending time with you. And if we could flip the chairs, I would ask you a million questions because I'm very inquisitive about people and I love to ask them things about themselves. And so I would be like an Oprah Winfrey.
So before we go to the last question, I'm going to make this offer to you. I had a guest about 6 months ago do this exact thing where we flipped the switch and she interviewed me.
Okay.
So if you're ever game for that, I'm game for it.
I would love it. But I have one question for you then. Let's do one. Do you care if I ask you one thing? I would be interested to know. You've talked to so many CMOs and we've said so many things to you. What is the one thing that someone said that you were like mind blown?
Great question. The very first thing, and when you say mind blown, it doesn't always necessarily mean a negative, right?
Exactly.
The first thing that came to mind is a negative. It was early on in my career at Forbes, and I was interviewing. I can't say the name of the brand, of course, but I was interviewing the CIO of a major Fortune 50 retail brand. Okay. And I'm going through this interview and I ask what surely sounds like, and you will agree, a very logical question. What does your typical customer look like? Mm-hmm. Would you believe they couldn't answer that question?
No.
I kid you not, Edithann. I can't make this up. I will tell you offline who the brand is if you want to know. They are no longer in the role. But fortunately, it was audio only then. It was pre-Zoom and all that, so they couldn't see my poker face or lack thereof. And I just had to find a wall to bang my head against. Going, are you kidding me?
No.
Like that. Isn't that marketing 101? Like
totally. How do you do your job if you don't know that? That's mind blowing.
Right. And it was my first foray, if you will, my first glimpse behind the curtain of going, just because a brand is at a certain level doesn't mean everybody in their roles are doing, they're amazing at their roles. Mm-hmm. And it just is. And that bore itself out over all the thousands, and I've done thousands of interviews in my career where it's kind of this misconception of, oh, you made it into this huge brand. You must be the best in the world at what you do. Not necessarily, no.
Yeah, I get that.
So that's the first thing that came to mind. But I'm totally down with I'll send you the link. It was the director of insights for Clorox who we did like a quote friendly takeover where she interviewed me. It was a blast, and I would love to offer you the same opportunity. We can talk about it later.
Okay, send it to me.
Last question. You wake up, what's your morning? Do you check your phone? Is it social, email, none of the above? Share your morning. What do you do?
I will tell you that the thing that I do in the morning brings me a lot of joy. My husband gets up and makes me a cup of coffee every day. And I will tell you that I adore him. Like, one of my biggest, most wonderful things in life is being married to Jason. And he's a busy man. He's got a big ass job. And for that guy to wake up and just make me a fresh cup of coffee every day, and then we sit together in bed and we watch the news and I drink my coffee that he made me, makes me very happy, and it starts the day just right.
I love it. That is a great way to end. And that's a really good man.
Yes, he is.
Thank you so much for your time. Stay tuned, everybody listening, for the Friendly Takeover Part 2.
That's for sure. I love it. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the CMO Whisperer Show. I hope you shared this episode with your friends. And if you have not already, please subscribe to be kept up to date on all the latest episodes. And if you're so inclined, leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you.